All right, welcome everyone in the hottest day of the year. I'm surprised you're all here. So this is the event that we launch our challenges. So we'll talk a bit about the challenge. We'll watch a little video about each of the individual challenges as well, except for one because we haven't got the video ready for that one. But I'll talk through some of the important things about the challenge. I want to say that there's no fire alarms planned. As you would expect. So if you hear one, it's serious. The fire exit is at the back and we have to go through there. There's a card there on top of the green fire alarm button that will get you through to the toilets and back if you need to. So please make use of it. Again, welcome everyone. Thanks very much for coming today. I'm going to introduce Mark Elliott, Program Director, to say a few words about the program and the spirit of CivTech. Then I'm going to come back and talk a bit about the stages of CivTech, so you can ask a few questions as well if you have any questions. And then we'll go through the challenge videos, and again you can ask questions about the videos. We have some of the challenge sponsors here. If you could stand up for just 30 seconds and briefly say which challenge. You start with Claire here. Which challenge you're...
What's the number of the challenge?
Just
three. So I'm the challenge sponsor for challenge 3, which is the ecosystem challenge, looking at how we pull together all the information we have across the sector as to what currently exists in the digital sphere.
Cool. Jay?
Also, Jay Pearce, Scottish Government Resourcing. Our project is pre-employment checks. Doesn't sound very specific, it's really about people in the background. That's what we're going to focus on. It's once we've recruited people, it's how we bring them into the Scottish Government, and we have to do checks, and we need to make sure that's quick, and we don't put people off joining us.
And Paul?
Paul Dimick, Student Awards Agency. Our challenge is about removing the barriers for access to student funding and reducing the dropout rates for most disadvantaged and groups with specific support needs.
So if you have any specific questions for these challenges, please grab them and have a chat with them. If you have any questions for any of the other challenges, you'll submit them through Public Contract Scotland, and that will get straight to the challenge sponsor, and then they'll provide an answer that everyone else can see. So it's a fair and open and competitive environment. So without further ado, Mark Elliott.
Thanks. Some of you will, I noticed when Rui explained that I was the Programme Director of CivTech, went, hey, I thought that was Alexander Holt. After 4 years of working on CivTech and 3 accelerators and 39 challenges, Alexander decided that his second child was a challenge too many and needed to step aside. So he's still with us, and he's going to do a huge amount of work in terms of strategic partnerships and emerging opportunities. But for the last 3 accelerators, I've been the head of the accelerator, and I was there before we actually got going from the get-go. So I've kind of, with Rui, Alexander and myself, we represent the first team. And I want to take you back 4 years ago when to explain why CivTech came about. And independently, a number of people, including Colin Cook, who is now the head of the Digital Directorate at the Scottish Government, started asking themselves a number of questions, which was about why, when the private, just about every sector in society had been disrupted in one way or another by technology, had the public sector not been disrupted in that way? And why were the systems that have proved so successful inside the private sector, such as accelerators and open challenge systems, not been adopted by the public sector? And that's where CivTech came from, this idea that could we adopt and then adapt the systems that the private sector had found so useful and make them work for the public sector and for the public good. And frankly, given the press that the tech sector has had over the last few years, that's probably no bad thing to do. And we're part of the Digital Directorate of the Scottish Government, which itself it's not just CivTech, there are many programs within it, but it's a very, very innovative sector. And in fact, stand up, your guilty partner. Do you want to just explain what you do? So no, Claire is another director, the digital director, who's doing incredibly interesting work in terms of procurement, which is another aspect of what we're doing here. So do you just want to explain what you're doing? Because I think that's really, I think that's exciting. It gives me a chance to have a drink.
An insight to the structures of Scottish Government that you guys know a lot about. So we are all in the Digital Directorate, and that's split into divisions, and CivTech is part of the division. now, which I'm also part of, which is called Commercial and Product, and we have 3 streams that run in that. So we have CivTech, looking at challenge-based working and bringing in innovation and looking at working with a variety of different companies. Then we have also, you may have seen some of these things come out, because actually procurement came out on Monday. We have the payments projects, looking at creating a payment service for Scotland. And then the part of the division that I lead on is called the Digital Commercial Service. So traditional procurement methods from learnings that we've done through CivTech, but just in general, don't necessarily lend themselves to digital transformation and to digital services, in that I'm sure some of us will have seen those big, long, exhaustive lists of requirements that makes it sound as if the government knows what they want, whereas actually we all know with some of the beauties of digital technology and digital approaches is that there are many different ways to crack a problem. So we need to look at how we can work better with the private sector. We don't have a model the same way that kind of our counterparts in the UK government do, where they're just bigger than we are. They have a lot more resources than we do, which means that they can have a lot more in-house built stuff, which they can then make available to the rest of the sector. But we have to look outside the civil service to kind of crack the problems that we have and transform the services that we have in Scotland. So we need to make sure that the way that we work with the private sector is as mutually beneficial as possible. And that the market understands where our standards are, where we're going, what we want, but can also help solve those things together. So there'll be lots of things coming out that you'll be able to engage in various different ways with the service that I'm running. So if you do see it, please don't run for the hills, and please please try and give us as much feedback as possible. And we'll be putting things out like through open contracting. We'll be putting out draft contracts so that we can look at how best we can, hopefully in some way, because I don't think anyone's really cracked this, is how we contract fully for agile. Things like that. That's a really big problem to solve. And so we're putting those things out as much as we can, and it'd be really great if people like you can engage with those, so that once we go out to buy certain things, and we hopefully can work with some of your organisations, there's much more of an understanding on either side as to how we do that, and we're all in it for a mutually beneficial partnership, rather than the more traditional kind of supplier and customer relationship that's maybe happened in the past. So just as you probably are now, eventually over the next 12 months at least, you'll be really fed up with my voice, so I'll stop now.
Thank you, Claire. There's an interesting point to pick up on what Claire said about the UK government, and they have far more money and they can do it in-house and everything like that. The interesting thing is, there's a report out from the UK government saying their system doesn't work. And our system is definitely working, in my opinion. So we've done 3 accelerators now. If you take the typical accelerator, and I'm going to cut out all those thousands of accelerators that claim to be accelerators that aren't true accelerators. We're very much a true accelerator, as much as we can be within the Scottish environment. The typical accelerator will end up with maybe 1 or 2, maximum 3 out of 10 companies going forward to further investment or further contracts. If you turn that on its head, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, that's what we're achieving. So we've got something very special here, because what we're doing with ours is getting around a problem that a lot of accelerators have, where you have a great idea, you work for 4 months flat out and discover there's no market for it. Actually, it's not something that's so great because nobody wants it. The great thing about this is, if you solve a problem for your particular challenge sponsor, you're likely to have other public sector organisations that need exactly the same solution.
And private as well.
And private, yes. A lot of our company, so in terms of the contracts that companies have gone on to win, 2/3 of them being public sector contracts and 1/3 private sector, which is good in itself. But when you look at the value of those contracts, the real value, it's almost diametrically the other way. The real value is coming from the private sector contracts companies are picking up. And as somebody said, it didn't sound very exciting, their challenge, but actually when you look, it's onboarding. Onboarding, recruiting and onboarding is a problem in the public sector, but boy, is it a problem in the private sector. You've got, I'm not going to say you've got a license to print money, but you can build a business around something like that. So, is there anything else I need to speak about?
I think touched on a good point, which is the opportunities after. So
Yeah.
As a bit of a
This is
stat-
Rui. So, sorry, this is Rui. In case you don't know who he is, he's
Rui
been
Cardoso.
here from the get-go as well. Challenge sponsor manager extraordinaire, and just an all-round brilliant guy.
All right, I'll go home now. So as a bit of
Pay me for that. Okay?
as a bit of a stat, the companies that left the first 3 cohorts have now went on to win over £5 million in contracts. So they created a product with CivTech, they nurtured the product, they tested the product with the product owner in the organization that owns the problem. Then, as Mark said, they went on to sell it elsewhere, both public and private sector. And all the companies combined have reached now over £5 million. So the opportunity is there. It's for you to chase it, but the opportunity is there. So I'm gonna talk a bit about the process, not in too much detail, because I think you'll have had time to read the process online, and I can see some familiar faces as well that already know the process upside down. But interrupt me if you have any questions. I think that'll be a better way to do this. So this year we had a slightly different approach. We staggered the challenges, so we launched 5 challenges and then 6 more yesterday, and 5 yesterday and 1 today. So the deadlines will be different for each of the rounds. You'll be aware of that from our wiki. Once we've received all the applications, we'll go internally, us and the challenge sponsors, through a desk exercise where we assess all the bids. After that, you'll receive a notice if you are through to the interview stage. This interview stage, it's up to you if you come here or if you want to do it through Skype. We suggest that if you can, to do it here, because it's always better to do it face to face, but you won't get marked down either way. That interview will last around 30 to 45 minutes. And in that interview, you'll have a chance to explain what you proposed in your own words, and then there'll be a bit of a Q&A. After that, so most challenges, except the one we launched today that I'll talk a bit in more detail later on when we get to that. Most challenges at that stage will have selected 6 different companies. And out of that interview, we select the top 3. And those top 3 companies go then to the exploration stage. Exploration stage will start at 17th of September. It's a Tuesday because Monday is a bank holiday in Glasgow. For those, so you have 2 stages of the exploration stage. The first 3 weeks, it's purely for engaging with the challenge sponsor. The more time you put in, the more chances you have at the other end, because you are speaking to the problem experts. No one will know more about what needs to be done than the challenge sponsor. So use that time, if you get through to that stage, use that time to spend it with your challenge sponsors. Then, the last 2 weeks will be the pitches. Again, about 45 minutes, you come in, you pitch, you resubmit your initial application, because now you have had 3 weeks to talk to your challenge sponsors. If you haven't had new ideas, something wrong there. So you resubmit your application, you pitch to us, and then we'll make a decision pretty soon after. You'll get a notice again if you're through. 1 company at that point, 1 company per challenge. You get through to the accelerator stage. That starts on
3rd or 4th
November at some point.
Early.
Early November. That starts at early November. And for the first 5-6 weeks, it'll be quite workshop intensive. So you'll go through a series of workshops on product development, business development, law, accounts, IP, public sector, user research. So a series of workshops. We put the workshops live on the wiki as well, so you can have a look at what you can expect. So the first 5 weeks, you go through a lot of workshops. And that's there for a reason. And some of you might think that, oh, I have experience in this, I have experience in that, I don't need to go to the workshop. And that might very well be true. But your experience could be used for some of the other 10 companies in the room. So we very much make this a mandatory thing for workshops, because if you have the experience in that area, there's something you can give to the other companies. And that's really good for this collaboration aspect of CivTech that we're trying to promote. The accelerator stage lasts for 4 months, around 4 months, until March next year. During the period, you'll meet regularly with your challenge sponsor, and every month there's a check gate review. So you go over, we've been doing the first month, you go over your proposal for the next month. You get £20,000 at that stage for the 4 months, but that's split into 4 tranches. So each of these check gate reviews will unlock the next £5,000 of money. We understand that's not a lot of money. Completely get that. This is based on a little bit of risk for you at this stage, because if you get through to that accelerator stage and you have a product that the challenge sponsor can use, then there's a bigger contract at the other end, and there's the opportunity to go, like Mark said before, sell this wider. So at that stage, after accelerator, you'll have up to £221,000 to negotiate the next contract. This is to take the MVP that you produced during the accelerator to a product that can now be implemented into the challenge sponsors. So 221, some contracts will be bigger, some contracts will be smaller because of the nature of the challenges themselves. In between accelerator and this bigger contract, there's demo day. Demo day last year was at EICC, just over there. We had 500 people from public sector, private sector, some investors, and that's a really good opportunity for both challenge sponsors and the companies to then present their problem and solutions. And it's kind of a celebration event where we've all been working really hard for 4 months, and now we want to celebrate a bit and show off what we've been doing. So it's a really good day to celebrate as well. So I'm sure you've seen the challenges, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here, but you might not have seen all of them. You might just focus on one that you were interested in. So today we're going to go through the 11 of them. We have some short videos for each of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play one by one, but pause in between them. And for a couple of minutes, if there's any questions that I can answer, I might not be able to answer all of them if the challenge sponsors aren't here. But if I can answer, then we'll answer those questions here. If not, we'll redirect you to submit those same questions through Public Contract Scotland. So first one is, actually we have people in the room, Skills Development Scotland.
Our challenge is called Know What I Want to Be When I Grow Up, and it's focused on careers education in primary schools.
The challenge provides us with a fantastic opportunity to explore new ways of engaging with children in early years education. What's really important for young people to understand is the things they're good at, the strengths they have, what the future might look like. So being able to develop resources that can help them better understand who they are and where they might want to get to, how to get there, and the skills they need to develop to be able to get there is critically important.
It's about opening up the aspirations to these kids, opening up the knowledge of what it would take and the skills they need. It's also about challenging gender stereotypes. One of the important things for us as SDS is finding the right medium for these primary schools to be engaging with. Obviously, given the age group that they're at, it needs to be something that's fun, it needs to be engaging, and needs to really talk to them at a suitable level so that they really get involved in the conversations about the careers. And that isn't necessarily a website. We're really keen to look at other types of technology that could potentially help us deliver a really impactful service to these primary schools.
Any questions on that? No, very self-explanatory. We want to be a bit early in the intervention about people's careers, and we want something a bit more dynamic than the website to get through those specific user groups.
Like, how open would they be to something like augmented or virtual reality?
Very open. They are really open-minded. Like all the challenge sponsors, really. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to CivTech. So yeah, very open, and it's worth pointing out that we're really open to any solutions. We don't claim to know what's the right thing. We don't. We wouldn't put it as a challenge. So any solution, if it makes sense for that specific problem, we'll listen. So next one, challenge 2, Alzheimer's Scotland. How can we help with long-term illnesses, access technologies that can enhance their care? And here's the video.
Our challenge is called Creating Adam. And Adam is about Digital and Me. About Digital and Me came about as a result of Taste of Change work that we've been doing in partnership with the Technology Enabled Care Programme, Scottish Government. And it was a response to the problem that people, when they're looking for solutions, digital solutions in order to self-manage long-term health conditions, don't have access to a source of curated and tested options that they know that they can turn to and rely on. By creating Adam, which will be a digital assessment tool, it means that people who are living with long-term health conditions will have a route to go to ask questions, to find out about things that can support them to live well, to achieve the outcomes that they want to live. And it can also help to reduce the pressure on services that support these people at the moment, things like telecare services.
That 46 or 47% of people don't receive post-diagnostic support, which is a really critical time for someone to start that journey in their support. So that could be a point where, a digital solution, somebody walking into an appointment with a smartphone in their pocket, so they could be given some digital supports day one, something, and then that journey can continue, and Adam could be then discussed at that point in their journey.
People have to get access to those technologies. So that's the kind of the wireframe path. What we want is to create the best technology to then support these people through those pathways into the right technologies. Any questions on that? Yes.
The laptop volume needs to go down and the telly volume needs to go up a little bit for the next one, please.
Okay. Any questions on that? I can't turn the volume down on that. But I'll put this one up. Next one, challenge 3, Scottish Government, and we've heard a little bit about this today.
So the title of the challenge is, how can technology help us to reuse digital resources across the public sector in Scotland?
So there's lots of good work happens across the public sector and across the Scottish Government in digital projects, and as we move forward, things are changing more and more, and there's hardly any projects that won't have a digital element in there of some way, be it a piece of technology or an approach or a process or a certain set of skills that somebody needs to develop.
Across the public sector, lots of organisations are running digital projects and programmes trying to transform themselves into digital organisations. And at the moment, they don't really have a way of finding out what other people have been doing. And therefore, there's lots of organisations who are essentially spending money and time trying to solve similar problems, or in some cases, the same problem. I think one of the real challenges for the solution is to be able to classify the information about a project in a very useful way.
I think one of the real benefits that we'd like to see come from this challenge is that people are reusing assets, reusing processes, reusing the ways that people work and the skills that we have across the sector as efficiently as possible, so that we're constantly being able to improve those products and get into that continuous improvement cycle, rather than organisations having to start from the beginning of a project again. They should just be able to add value on top rather than having to deliver it all separately.
You can direct straight to the challenge sponsor on this one and a couple of other ones like we heard. So there's one there, Claire.
Hi there. So when I saw this, I thought it sounds more like a procurement of services necessarily than a new technology build. Is that fair to say? Potentially.
No, so a lot of these services already exist, or projects so there'll be capabilities and kind of commodities that are used in various different organisations right now that have solved certain problems for them, and there'll be people in the other part of the sector that are trying to do the same thing. Right. So it's about pulling together all that information, not just about the kind of the services that have been created, but also the approach that people have taken, the processes that people are using, and also the skills that are required as well. So it's.
Are those projects not using something like Jira or some other project management? Is it a way to try and combine the information coming out of that into something else?
They're not all development projects, so Jira would be a bit of a hammer to crack a walnut if we were, if we were using that for everything. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Jira is used across Scottish Government definitely, but only where it's appropriate. So there's lots of different methodologies that are used across the sector. There's also if you're just looking at the kind of the Scottish Government and its delivery bodies, you're looking at about 140 organisations. If you add in the rest of the public sector, you're looking at about 200. So if you add in kind of NHS and local government into that, there's lots of stuff that's happened and has been solved across all of those organisations, and a lot of those problems will be incredibly similar to ones that are somewhere else, and we don't have any way of pulling in all of that information for people to then be able to interrogate that information.
Any other questions? I see you brewing something, Rab. No questions?
No, I'm like you, I thought there's a little bit more services. And I mean, in terms of curating that, there's an element of sort of classification of different, how do you, I mean, how I mean, I can see, I think what you say is true, and there's an element of how do you get people to communicate better and know what's going on and see crossovers that might not be apparent, but a 10-minute chat makes it apparent. I can absolutely see the problem. I'm just wondering, maybe it's my lack of imagination, how technology can help. But I suppose that's the thing I need to answer.
That's the several $1,000 question, isn't it?
So I suppose my question is, so is categorisation of things a part of the project?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a common language across the sector around project. I don't think there's a common language at all really embedded yet around how we talk about all of these different capabilities, components, various different things. So we need to make it so that it doesn't become a burden on a transformation project that's already pretty pressured to have to translate what they do from their organisation's language, common language set to a more general one. So there's lots of different aspects in there. I think we need to make sure that it's easy to use, because if it's not easy to use, people won't use it.
Yeah. Well, that's the up to, but not over £250,000 question.
Good point.
For pure reasons.
But nonetheless, significant.
You had a question?
I just wonder if you could give a specific example of a project where such a technology would be useful to have. So a specific case, just for us to better understand.
Yes. So this happened because there was a personal network there, and there was people that had a conversation. But if there hadn't have been some of the similar people on each of these projects, this might not have happened. But quite a lot of the Social Security Scotland and the service patterns for a lot of those benefits are actually based on a service pattern that was developed in SEPA around application of licences. So we didn't have to do that again, we just reused that service pattern as to how that works, but that relied on a conversation that happened between people who, and there was some common staff that had been moved from one project to another project, whereas projects, when they're initiated, it'd be really useful for them to be able to look somewhere without having to know 20 people in 20 different organisations and make sure that those people owe them enough of a favour to give them lots of information and things like that. So it's, I think a really good news story out of this would be that we're reusing a lot of these things, and also I think the commonness of some of these things, I think this will help with, in the fact that, for example, I don't know, some organisations may need to buy a room booking system. So they buy a specific room booking system. And then the organisation next door needs to buy an appointment booking system. So they buy a separate appointment booking system. But we know that the two things are the same thing. They just might be badged up differently, but the service pattern, the function, or the process, the function, however, the journey, however we want to label that, whatever language we use, they're the same thing. And so we need some way of showing people that as well. So that's an example of reuse there, is around all the fact that there's lots of organisations out there that have their own CMSs, web teams, contracts with other organisations, whereas actually internally in Scottish Government, in the Digital Directorate, we have I think about 3 or 4 different products that could do that people will be able to use, but they don't know about them. So when they kick off a project, their first port of call quite often is,
we need to look at this project rather than we need to look across first before we look in, and we need to give people a way of being able to do that easily, because quite often that would be in addition to they're already very pressured with their resources, and hopefully if we can get people on board quicker, that'll ease as well.
Any other questions? Let's move on to the next one.
We provide funding to students across Scotland, and what we want to do is increase uptake of funding and reduce dropout rates, particularly amongst marginalised groups and those who are hard to reach.
So the challenge we've put forward is to look at how we can better support those that could benefit most and who need the support most for the funding and packages of support that we offer.
Those who need the support most have, in some senses, the highest burden on providing the evidence.
If we take students with disabilities, for example, we have excellent funding packages for them and support that's available. However, to access that, they have to provide a lot of evidence of their disability, go through a number of assessments and provide a lot of information to us before we can assess their claim and support them. Another example might be those with a care experience. They have to provide evidence from what might be quite a painful experience in their past and go through the process of often providing that evidence to multiple different organisations. So it's to find a way that technology might help kind of redress the balance and make things more of a level playing field. Another factor is that the expectations and demands of our customers are ever changing. We're sort of in this unique position where we refresh our customer base every year. There's a sort of 4-year period of study. We have an increasing population of students that are retraining and maybe from an older generation with little or no knowledge of digital applications and how they work. We have groups where English is not their first language, so there's a need for solutions to be intuitive and usable by a whole range of different user types.
If you have any questions for that one, Paul is over there. I think it'd be a good opportunity to ask questions.
I made a couple of questions on this one, sorry. So I'm not sure why I jumped out dropout rate. What is the actual dropout rate? What's the annual submissions each year? What percentage is the
Yeah, so the dropout rates, there's 2 or 3 different aspects of this. One of the fundamental challenges we have is we don't really understand the reasons for dropout. We know that a percentage of them are for academic reasons, which is inevitable, but there are a significant number that are for non-academic reasons, and those tend to trend towards being higher where there is a higher SMID count in a SMID areas. They trend towards people with additional support needs. So that's something we want to make sure we are tackling, so that if it's not academic reasons, the rates shouldn't vary too much across the population. They tend to be around about 5 or 6%, but they trend directly to SMID areas. So the more impoverished or disadvantaged your background, the higher those rates are. There's obviously a lot of complex reasons behind that, but part of the challenge is understanding that and understanding how we can help to tackle that. Yeah, so that's the dropout part. Sorry, did you ask 2 questions?
Well, I was asking how many submissions are there in a year?
Submissions, we have 250,000 students annually, or submissions annually. Those range from undergraduate, postgraduate and part-time study. We do not have numbers for part-time study for a lot of this stuff, so there's 180,000 that are full-time students. Part-time students are a bit of an unknown to us, so again, part of the challenge is understanding our user base a bit better, understanding those dropout rates and those challenges that they have.
And you mapped the journey? You did a user journey mapping?
Yeah, we've had several attempts at sort of cracking this, so we've got several user maps and user journeys. Not necessarily end-to-end for every student, but certainly those students who have particular support needs, we have user
Any other questions?
Yes, Paul, I think in reading the thing in your video as well, and a lot of it's the most disadvantaged people get most paperwork to fill out if you want.
That's certainly part of the challenge, yeah.
And that's
and the least support.
available to help them.
Well, I was going to ask about that, but so you need to know you're entitled to something, you then need to fill in a bit of paper to get that entitlement. Whereas if you could have a better view of, albeit it might be confidential information, if someone's come from a care environment, they live in an area of multiple deprivation, whatever other factors there might be, I think from reading the spec, there is support out there, and almost that information could be a push to proactively approach people and suggest.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly another element of the challenge is the repetition of providing that evidence.
Yes.
So we've taken disabled students as an example. They already have an additional burden. They need support more than the typical student. They have an additional burden to provide lots of additional evidence, and they have to provide that evidence to multiple different people across the system, which seems kind of unnecessary. However, we also have the flip side of that, which is protecting the public purse and making sure that it's not open to exploitation by people who might willfully try and defraud us. So that's the tension, is making sure that we're able to prove that the effective controls are in place, but also freeing up that funding and freeing up the time basically to focus on the academic achievements.
Any other questions? And we'll move on to the next challenge. Edinburgh Council.
So our challenge is to hopefully improve the property condition of tenements in the city. Now, tenements are, it's a nationwide problem for Scotland. There are 580,000 tenements around Scotland. And a tenement is a building where there is more than one property, two or more properties divided horizontally in separate ownership. So if you have a property above or below you, it could be a commercial property or another flat, then you live in a tenement. And the property condition we're trying to improve is the common elements of that building. And common elements would be the roof, the stair, the external walls, front and back doors, or any structural element.
I think in my eyes, in terms of what this problem is, that the problem we're trying to solve could be quite a few different key areas. It could be about identifying who those owners are in the first place, because that is the first difficult entry point that people find if they're taking forward this work themselves. And even as a local authority, we still need to make those checks too. It could be about creating some kind of mechanism that lets people talk to each other to agree what those repairs are. It could be something to do with the property condition, so we can understand that property condition better, so we know which repairs need to be carried out. It could be something around how the owners can finance this work and how we can support them to do that.
In order for communal repairs to be done, you need to have someone take the lead. So we refer to them as a lead owner. It would be good to find a solution to that. How do we find a lead owner?
We all live in flats. This is a very relevant problem. Sometimes something breaks and whose responsibility it is. So Edinburgh Council is trying to find a tool that helps in this process of gathering the people. Everyone that owns a place in a tenement has the responsibility to contribute to these repairs, but sometimes people, if it doesn't affect them personally, they try to get away with it. So this is a challenge to help citizens go through this sometimes very painful process. Is there any questions that I can try to answer?
The challenge also mentions that one of the problems is to find who else is involved in the same tenement. I would expect that Edinburgh City Council has databases about this.
Yes. And registers of Scotland. The problem is for a citizen to find that. You need to go to the council to register. So is there a better way that you can actually find out?
So can we get access to that databases?
That's something to put on your proposal and then to be assessed.
But is it theoretically possible?
Yeah, there's data there. There's data in the registers of Scotland.
Because that's the way to find the solutions. I'm not.
Yeah. So the problem also is that council has records, registers of Scotland has all the records. So there needs to be a bit of matching the data there. But that's a problem that we're aware of, and we'll guide you through that. Any other questions? The next one. So this was the first round of challenges that went out last week. The next 6 challenges are new. Some went out yesterday, some one of them today. So you might not have a chance to have a look at. So we'll play the video and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A as well.
So our challenge is to hopefully improve the property condition of tenements in the city. Now, tenements are, it's a nationwide problem for Scotland.
The global climate is changing, and with it, our weather. We need to be mindful of the opportunities now for Glasgow to take a global lead in being a city that does the right thing in reducing its emissions, but also on a local level, we need to work with ourselves in the city, with our communities, and with the broader metropolitan city region to ensure that we're a more resilient city and that we plan for the inexorable and inevitable changes that are going to come about through climate change to our local weather patterns. That means more flooding, more heat in the summer, and poorer air quality as well. We need to ensure that we can protect our people from that and also enhance our resilience in order that we can not just survive but also thrive through these very challenging times.
So in terms of what this challenge is about, we have the evidence out there that the climate is changing. Glasgow City Council has declared a climate emergency. And what we're looking to do is to find a way to provide an increased awareness and engagement with the general public in the Glasgow City region, so they're more aware of what is happening, what the impacts are, and then provide them with data so that they can assess their own impacts.
One of the exciting opportunities about the programme that I'm involved with leading is that we actually have direct access to citizens, those who are going to benefit most from the outcome of this challenge, and that's really, really exciting. We've set up fantastic networks and relationships with our communities across the organisation. One of the things is, I think before we did this type of approach, assumptions were made about what citizens might want, might need. But what we're actually doing now is that we've created networks directly with these citizen groups who've been delighted to be actually involved in co-designing a solution that they can benefit from.
So, any questions on this one? Glasgow Council, it's one of the newer ones. The idea here is to help the environment and to use the data that Council already has to provide that in a way that citizens can understand and can use it to make their better decisions. And on the other side, how can we start collecting more data to have a better picture of what's going on in terms of the environment in starting with Glasgow, but I'm sure if you crack the solution there'll be plenty of opportunities. Any questions?
I suspect the answer is both, but is there focus more on so that the city can manage its affairs better, or behaviour change amongst the citizenry?
It is a bit of both. I think I would submit that question through PCS, so you can get the answers from the challenge sponsors on that one. If you ask me my opinion, I think you can't separate one from the other because it needs to be a collective effort.
But given the size, I mean, there are cities doing this all over the world, and to not have focus there is kind of, I'm thinking maybe that's too wide, you know?
So I'd really urge you to submit through PCS because I don't want to give an answer when the challenge sponsor might have a different view of what comes first. So if you submit that through PCS, we'll get an answer to you as soon as possible. Next one.
So the challenge is we want to find a way to track assets and use technology to do that. Things go missing when we try to patch, when we try to bring them in for like an MOT process, and we can't locate them and we don't know who they're with. So we're looking how can we use technology to track assets. So in my case, it was IT assets that became the business issue for me and the business problem. We don't want our employees tracked. It's only about tracking the assets. We need to know where the assets are, what I'm looking for and what I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for to rely on 5G connectivity. I'm not looking to rely on power to an asset because the asset could extend to be a bin or a lawnmower or an ID badge that we need to locate. That could be for a lone worker type environment. I'm not wanting a solution that's going to be very cost prohibitive. and I'm not wanting a solution that relies totally on in-building Wi-Fi connectivity. So the level of accuracy detail that would be really good would be to pinpoint it to a room location, but realistically we realise that even sometimes knowing a building, a GPS type point that it is, and that would be like for home workers, that you could say somebody's actually left that device at home. But to actually be able to say within a school that has got, at the minute we've 6,000 Chromebooks rolled out across 38, 39 schools, to be able to say that it's in a particular area of a school, you know, in corridor X or corridor Y, as opposed to just in that school. The high schools are quite big, so it would be good to pinpoint it. Room detail would be fabulous, but obviously we would take any options that are available, and any detail would be good.
On this one, the typical asset tracking. There's many types of assets, and sometimes we need to know what they are. So they want a solution that is cheaper than the 4G and connectivity solutions that are out there, but that can help them track different types of assets, like mentioned in the video, from IT assets to then others. So quite a bit of creativity needed on that one. Is there any questions? Cool. Next one again.
My challenge is how we use technology to support our employees in a more proactive way rather than a reactive way in terms of coping with the exponential rate of change and transformation. So roles are changing across the council, and there are perhaps roles where people would have thought they would never have had to be using digital have gone. Every role in the council has some reliance and use digital. We need to be bearing that in mind as we look at our challenge. That needs to be something that can adapt and change, using that as these roles start to develop. So the role, or the example I would give would be gardener. So people think, well, the grass is still going to be cut and the lawnmower still needs serviced. Yep, but they could be robotic lawnmowers, which then need an element of a digital fix at the service stage, not just a mechanical fix. And we want to keep our current staff who have the knowledge, know the job, know the area, and be able to upskill them to cope with that change and manage that change in a positive way. And if we can use the data and a digital solution to make that person feel better supported through that transition, that's a win-win for everybody.
I'll give another example on this challenge because I think it's quite relevant if you've seen the full-length video, again with the gardeners. There's the example mentioned that there's a digital aspect to jobs, but there's also the other side. Since we're developing these tools for employees and staff, can we actually provide them with more information that will help their jobs? And the other example in the bigger video is that gardeners in the winter, they have more skeletal muscular diseases because the soil is harder, because it's colder, etc., etc. So actually, can we use this data to provide them with the support before they actually need the support? So there's two slightly different aspects to this challenge. Is there any questions? Cool. Next one, Scottish Government, and we have Jay in the room.
The challenge is about improving our pre-employment checks process. And really what we're looking to do is to see if there's technological solutions to improve the quality of the check process, to reduce the time it takes, and overall to improve the experience for both the candidates who are going through it and the staff supporting them. The reason why this challenge is important is because the Scottish Government is expanding to deal with the increasing demands being placed upon us, the devolution of further powers, etc., and consequentials of Brexit. So we need more external recruitment, so we need to attract the right people and give them a good experience to improve retention of staff and to get them into the organisation as quickly as possible. We are largely a paper-based process, which means we rely on candidates reading instructions that we email them, understanding those instructions, and then taking appropriate actions to collate all the information we need, either sending it to us by post or by email, and that has issues in terms of loss of data, loss of understanding or misunderstanding of the instructions we provide, and it just generally takes a long time, and it's not a good experience for the candidates, we believe. What we'd really like to see drawn out in any proposed approach would be a user-centric design. We want to ensure that whatever is designed is focused on the users, the candidates applying and the staff who are supporting them, to ensure that it is as intuitive as possible, that it guides them through the process, and it helps and aids understanding of how to complete the process quicker and more efficiently.
No, you go first, Rob.
Oh, after you, Peter.
What's the nature of the checks and the information that you require from prospective employees, and also in terms of numbers and of recruits? Is this how will the load and the numbers increase over time?
I'm sure that helps. The range of the checks. We call it pre-employment checks, but there's a number of things we need to do, ranging from basic checks on making sure that when we're bringing somebody to the Scottish Government, that they are who they say they are. So fundamental checks in terms of checking identity, passports, driving licenses, and being sure who we know the candidate is. To security checks, we have to do as a bare minimum basic disclosure, but depending on the type of work that the candidate will be doing, it might require higher security checks, which again we have to do. We have to collect certain information purely, we call it checks, but it's not really, it's just harvesting data to make sure that we've got all your bank details to pay you when you arrive, to make sure that you've understood the pension opportunities or options that you've got available to you, so when you join, you're enrolled in the right pension scheme. So there's a lot of sort of information we collect. So that's the range. The second question was the volume. It's really hard to predict, because the Scottish Government is trying to deal, like most people, with predicting the unknown of Brexit. We do know that we're going to have to react, we're going to have to plan for what we know and what we don't know, and once it happens, we'll have to deal with the consequences. So at the moment we're looking at recruiting externally additional people plus the normal churn, but that could be anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 new employees every year.
Can I just...
Yeah, sure, please.
It sounds like quite a lot of the information is confidential in nature and personally identifiable information.
100%.
So could you comment on that? And also, does the scope of the solution you're looking for stop at your boundaries, or are you concerned with the issues of how that information goes on to be validated by other parts of government that might have access to
I don't
records
want to creep into solutions, but you're absolutely right. In order to check someone's identity at the moment, we ask for a physical copy of their original passport. And they literally have to either send in their passport by the post or turn up at our building in Edinburgh with their passport. Now, if you're going on leave, that's not a good place to be, so you might have to travel a long distance to bring your passport. We then take that passport, and we've got a machine that is linked to the Home Office. We put your passport in it, just like when you go through an airport, you put your passport in a security machine, we do the same thing. So we can check whether that's a legitimate passport or a fraudulent passport, and we can check that you are the person that's there. So that's the kind of physical check we do. There may be technological solutions which mean we don't need to see your passport, we just need to know enough about you for us to go directly to the Home Office and say, does this person have a legitimate passport, and are they the person they say they are? Similarly with Disclosure Scotland, we physically ask candidates to apply for a disclosure certificate. They then get the paper copy and they bring it to us. Disclosure Scotland is part of the Scottish Government.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see the irony there.
Yeah.
We do.
Stretching the obvious.
Peter, to take the role of program director, I had to go through this. I was due to leave the country the day after I had to, submit my stuff. I had to travel there because I didn't want to risk my passport. And the irony is, the Home Office actually give you guidance: do not give your passport to anyone.
Yeah.
You know, and do not post it. They actually say in their guidance, don't post it.
Don't take a photo and don't send it
Yeah,
over email.
But there's things in there like, you know, the way it works at the moment is you require a passport and you do as you've described. But I suppose the fundamental thing is, what are you trying to establish? And the need to have a passport immediately excludes quite a number of people from working in the Scottish Government.
We need you to prove who you are. So you're absolutely right. There's a Home Office standard, and the way we do that is either a passport or other means that can do the same thing. So you're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be a passport, but that is the easiest and typically the most common way. Again, I don't want to air all my dirty linen, but people send us their passports through the post, and more often than not, we return them. But not always. That's not a good, you know, the Home Office says don't post them for a good reason. Even if they do it recorded delivery, and we always return it recorded delivery, but still. So that's not good, but you're right, there are various ways of checking people's identity. We have to have disclosure, and we have to have, on top of that, security checks. So if you put them to one side, we then just have what I would call just harvesting of data. We need to set up an HR record for each individual coming in, which is used to trigger loads of other things, like your pensions, like your computer access when you arrive, plus your physical access. So there's lots of other things that happen. And sometimes
onboarding process that cascades into
exactly. So we want to make sure that when we've got the information, that it's reused effectively, not just having to be copied by different teams within the Scottish Government. That we use it rather than recreating it. I'm not sure if I've answered all your questions.
That's fine. Thanks very much, Jay.
But I think I'll emphasise it again. Even though this is quite an important process we do, we've got to bring people into the Scottish Government. And we've got to do these checks. What we've got to do, though, is get people into the Scottish Government, and we want to keep them there. So it's about people and the experience they have. So I was speaking to somebody earlier, I forget the gentleman's name, but at the moment we send out really complicated instructions. We want the digital solution to make sure that it's capable of being understood by people with learning needs, with visual disabilities, so that the forum, whatever it is, removes barriers, because we want recruitment to be to recruit a diverse and inclusive workforce. We want to represent the people of Scotland. So we need to make sure we don't create unintended barriers through the way we ask for information or interact with people. So it's about people at the core of this. I know it feels like it's a paper chase or a digitisation of a paper chase, but it's not. It's about the people behind that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? So next one. We don't have a video, unfortunately, not yet. We'll have a video next week. There's been some problems with the editing and getting the video approved, so I'll speak a little bit about the challenge. And then you can ask some questions if you like. So Transport Scotland has a problem they'd like you to solve. So there's a policy being discussed right now around low emission zones around Scotland for the 4 biggest cities in Scotland. So low emission zones will be places within the city that only a certain type of cars and vehicles can go in that respect some lower levels of emissions, etc. So not older cars. Now, there's also the Blue Badge scheme, which you might be aware, that allows people free parking spaces around the cities, etc. People with nearing retirement or with some sort of mobility difficulties. So there's a problem here because the low emission zones will be enforced via number plate recognition. So there'll be technology implemented in the cameras around the cities that will read your number plate and assess if your vehicle should or can be in that area based on the emissions of your vehicle. Now, the Parliament is discussing that it's not approved yet, but we want to prepare the technology before the policy is approved. Parliament is discussing that Blue Badge holders should be exempt from these low emission zones and could use any car in these low emission zones, which presents a problem because the Blue Badge is a physical badge that you put on your car. So if the low emission zones is being recognized via the number plate recognition, so via the car, and the Blue Badge is a card, a physical card that you can use it and in any car that you drive, then there's a mismatch there that it will make difficult to allow for these exemptions for blue badge owners. So we wanted a technological solution that allows for blue badge owners to go through those low emission zones without losing any of the other benefits that the blue badge gives them, but that allows them to go through that zones without being interrupted or bothered by the number plate recognition system. Is there any questions around there?
The challenge also mentions part of the problem that someone could misuse the blue badge.
Yes.
And
that's been the case. We don't have the exact data on that, but there's been misuse of blue badges from, for example, deceased people, and they don't return the passes and they keep on using
how
passes.
is that enforced currently for parking or for anything else where the blue
So there's a big problem that we're trying to solve as an adjacent problem to this, which is the fraud, which at the moment we don't have a way to enforce it, because if you have the badge and you're not in the car, if you just parked it and left the badge, we don't know who took the car there. So it can be enforced. So there's a dual element to that. And there's also an added benefit that could be brought over from this technological solution, which is if a blue badge owner, for example, drives to the train station in Glasgow and leaves then the blue badge on the car in Glasgow, it's a physical badge. So then they travel to Edinburgh, they rent a car here, and they would need the blue badge to then park in Edinburgh as well, but they don't have it because it's in Glasgow. So if it's a digital solution, that can now be accommodated as well.
Also, there's a price limit on the challenge mentions that shouldn't be expensive, the solution. Do you have any indication what means expensive?
Well, we're always looking for the cheapest possible.
How many blue badges are there in Scotland?
I think that's on the challenge. But if it's not on the challenge, just send us an email. I think it's 250,000, but don't quote me on that. I'm not too sure.
The badges, I believe they are the legislation is supported by Transport Scotland, but they're issued by local authorities.
Yes.
Are the local authorities involved in the
Transport Scotland has a number of local authorities partnering up with us that will give you access to the blue badge scheme.
Are you able to say which ones they are? Or?
No, I'm okay. Any other questions? Cool.
And just to clarify what I think you said is the badge belongs to the person, so it could be a variety of cars that...
Yes. And that's the main problem here, that we want to keep that as a benefit for the people who use it, whatever car you're using. And then the low emission zones might flag up some of the cars, but then recognizing that there's a blue badge in that car, so the red flag goes away. Right, so last one, we just launched this today. Before we play the video, I'm going to talk a little bit about this one because it's a slightly different process. So this one is an environmental challenge. It's a very, very relevant problem that we're trying to solve, because there's a multitude of approaches that can be taken to solve this problem. They can be solved from a data approach, from a scientific approach, from a seeds approach, and you'll get what I'm saying in a second if you haven't seen the challenge. We have a slightly different process. So the way it's going to work is, instead of the typical, for the other 10 challenges, in the initial stage we're selecting 6 companies to interview. For this challenge we don't put a limit, because we want to interview as many companies as give us a plausible solution. The second stage will be up to 10 companies for the exploration stage, to work 3 weeks with the challenge sponsor. That doesn't mean that will be 10 companies though. Up to 10 companies if you meet the minimum standards, if we think there's something valuable there. If we have 10 different applications that have something valuable there, we'll invite up to 10 companies. Then the accelerator. This challenge, we can't be sure that it's going to work until we do the lab tests. So we can't select just one company. So we'll select up to 5 companies for the accelerator stage to then prove the proposition in the lab environment. So £20,000 each for those companies. So you can put in an application for just a little bit of the problem or for the whole problem, and then we'll negotiate that through the different stages. At the accelerator, then up to 5 companies, £20,000, up to demo day. Then demo day, the pot of money is slightly different than than the other ones for the pre-commercialization. It's £485,000 for the pre-commercialization stage. Now, it could be that the 5 companies at accelerator stage get a further contract at that stage because the lab tests went well for all the 5 companies, or it could be that just one company gets the contract at that stage because only that company went through the lab tests phase. So it's a slightly different approach that we need a bit more time to kind of get into these potential solutions to see if they actually work in a real world environment. It's a slightly different process. There's an explanation on the wiki, but we'll let you watch your video and then ask some questions.
It's aware of the climate emergency, and it's one of the responses to the climate emergency is how we can maybe use forests more to act as a carbon sink. Forests absorb carbon from the atmosphere, and by doing that and using wood products a lot more to replace concrete and steel, we can help transition Scotland to a low carbon economy. Fundamental to that is growing our forest resource. And our challenge is about trying to alleviate some of the seed supply and plant supply pressures within the sector.
Trees in particular are a really vital part of the equation because they are carbon negative. They are actually taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it, whereas so many other solutions are only ever looking at reducing the amount of emissions that they provide, whereas forests and trees are actually a solution to the problem rather than a reduction in the scale of the problem.
So one of the pressures we face in the sector is we have a precious resource of seed which we need to make go as far. We need to stretch that seed resource as far as possible. Now, at the moment, we recognise that a lot of the seed that we use doesn't make it through into young seedlings that can be planted out in the forest. So we're looking for a really keen, innovative partner to work with to try and find ways to maximise the use of seed within the forestry sector.
We need a solution that better utilises the seed we currently have available, minimises losses and results in a much higher proportion of the existing seed going on to leave our tree nurseries as trees. We need something that will help us to get more saleable trees from our existing supply stock, which doesn't use loads more manual labour, doesn't require us to stop production for several years and doesn't need us to spend millions of pounds on infrastructure changes. There are a variety of emerging technologies that we think could play a part in helping to solve this challenge, both in protecting and processing seeds before, during and after planting, and that make use of things like robotics, automation, image processing and chemical and physical treatments. This challenge is about modernising forest nursery practices and bringing in new technology to update some procedures which haven't changed for decades.
Is there any questions around that challenge? Yeah, I wouldn't have any either, to be honest. Cool, that's all the challenges that we have for CivTech 4. Hope there's something that suits your skills and expertise. Next, we are doing a bit of...
Yeah, so, hello everybody, thanks for staying with
Katie
us
McNeil.
on the hottest night. So I'm Katie, I'm another member of the CivTech team. We also have Hayley Robertson here, who's also been hugely responsible for gathering these challenges together this time around. So we've got a bit more time for networking. If you have any more questions that you'd like to ask, especially about the process or the culture or what it's like working in CivTech, then Hayley, Rui, myself, or Mark, if he's still here. I can't see his face, he's in the back. We would be delighted to answer them for you. And again, if you want to have a bit more of a chat with our challenge sponsors, feel free to do so. Or if you're also now just dying to get out of here, thanks so much for coming along this evening. It's been a real pleasure to host you here in CivTech. So, floor is open. Thank you all very much for coming.